I talk about the nearly or over at this point 4,000 so-called asylum seekers coming from Honduras through El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico to the USA. Now, this caravan allegedly started as about 150. Now it's ballooned to over 4,000, and it'll probably pick up more people as it goes along. Their whole point is to try to so-called seek asylum, but really what they're doing is gathering together in large numbers to bombard the U.S. border to force us to take them in. You know, it's supposed to be this whole process. You go to certain checkpoints, you seek asylum, and then your process maybe released into the country, but they want to force their way in. This is a big reason why we need that wall. We need that wall ASAP. Now, let's start from the beginning. They're claiming that they are fleeing persecution and violence and whatnot in their country of origin. Now, according to international law, if you're truly an asylum seeker trying to escape a particular place that's violent, dangerous, poverty, or whatever, you're supposed to stop in the first country that you come to. And that's not what these people that are allegedly coming from Honduras are doing. I'll place a map on the screen before you. You see where Honduras is located. It is very far south. We're talking almost South America. They're coming through Guatemala, and in some cases El Salvador, and through the pretty sizable country of Mexico all the way to the USA. And their goal is to get released into the country, because the law as it stands today is if you come as a family, you got kids, well, allegedly a family. If you're an adult with kids, or if you're a child yourself, you're supposed to be released into the interior to a family member until they can get your citizenship straight, or your status, whether it's green card, citizen, whatever the case may be. That's the law, which is why Trump was enforcing this whole thing about family separation. Family separation, all that is keeping the so-called parents away from the so-called children for a variety of reasons. First of all, if you come to the border illegally, you're committing a crime, number one. Number two, we don't know if the adults that are coming with children are actually coming with their children. They could be a coyote. You're talking about human trafficking. That does go on. You have a lot of child sex slaves and slaves in general that come to the border through these coyotes, not just from Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala. They're also coming from China, Russia, Nigeria, Canada even. Trump said that we have many criminals coming to the U.S. border through this caravan, and nobody can say he's lying. We all know at this point that criminals choose that route to come into our country. I mean, what other way would you come but illegally, but trying to bombard us? Either you're going to try to sneak in somebody's truck or something in the back of the vehicle, in the wheel well. You're going to try to come in the dark of the night, sneaking across like, GoldenEye 007, or you want to come in this big group trying to force your way through. This is the same thing that is done overseas. Remember, in the enclave of Ceuta, if I'm pronouncing that correctly or incorrectly, just let me know. But this is in Morocco, if I'm not mistaken. There's a Spanish enclave or exclave. Basically, it's a piece of land that is part of Spain, but is on the continent of Africa. It's right there in Morocco, very close to Spain. You got a lot of so-called asylum seekers that come from West Africa half the time that are trying to force their way into the Spanish enclave, so they will be at that point granted European access. The goal is to get to places that give you large welfare benefits, or a place that has a lot of money. You're your economic refugee, which is exactly what these people are. They're economic refugees, and they're also criminals. It's very easy to see. Now, I like what Trump has done here, or what he's threatening to do, which is cutting off aid to these particular countries. And you can see the aid on the screen before you. You may think that the aid amount that we're giving to these countries is low, but keep in mind that we're not talking about gigantic countries. Mexico is a pretty sizable country. I'm not sure of their exact population. I think it's about 125 million. Don't quote me on that. But it's not quite our population. Is big nonetheless. Honduras, however, where this so-called migrant caravan of asylum seekers is coming from, only has about 6 million people. Now, to put that in the proper context, LA County by itself has 10 million people. All right. There are many cities in the U.S. that have that same kind of population. I would suggest, I would guess somewhere like Minneapolis, St. Paul probably has right around that same population. From one city is the equivalent of an entire country. So when you see that 75 million, understand the context of it. You're not talking about a country that is as big as the USA. You're also talking about a country that has a different form of currency, if I'm not mistaken. They're probably on the peso or whatever their particular currency is. Imagine how far the dollar goes. A lot of these individuals that are in this so-called migrant caravan are going to go back to their country of origin, or they won't go back. They'll send money back to their country of origin, and the dollar goes a very long way. And again, to stress this whole point about them being economic refugees, there was a one little girl that got caught at the border. I believe she came from Honduras as well, or El Salvador, one of these places south of the border. It was not Mexico. And it was on the cover of Time magazine where they photoshopped an image of the little girl crying and then Trump looking down on her. Well, the reality is that the little girl was not really in poverty. The mother kidnapped the little girl from the father, from the family, and fled to the USA to have a so-called better life. Although the father had a job, he was considered kind of like middle class, upper middle class in their country of origin. These people really aren't fleeing poverty and crime and stuff like that. They're just trying to come to the U.S. because the reality is a lot of times they come to neighborhoods that also have poverty and crime here when they get here. It's not like they have, a fantastic ability to make money. So they're going to come a lot of times to crime infested areas, sometimes to black neighborhoods, and they don't really like us too well a lot of times, and they run us out. But that's a whole different story. And I digress. I won't even get into the whole firebombing situation that happened in Los Angeles. So I'll go ahead and move on. At the end of the day, as I close, the military has been called in. So I hope that they do a good job. I'm not quite sure if it's our military or if it's Mexican military or other countries' militaries, but we already have military bases at the border. We have border security, and we need that wall to be that extra layer of security because you never know who's coming in. And you got all kind of diseases coming because not everybody has their immunizations. You already see there's some kind of polio-like disease that is sprouting up in children with the average age of 4. I think it's like over 100 cases. Where are these diseases coming from? It's not hard to tell. You have a bunch of parents that are not inoculating their children here in the U.S. And you also have a bunch of people coming across the border illegally with no kind of shots that are coming from different environments, different climates, different cultures, different foods, different types of things that would open them up to dangerous illnesses. You're talking about some 28 days later type situations potentially happening due to the lack of security at the border. So whatever Trump needs to do, whatever Congress should do as far as changing the law, because the big thing here is the families being, or quote unquote families being released into the interior until they can get the whole thing straight with their citizenship, green card, or whatever. They're taking advantage of that. These people aren't dumb. They watch television, they watch the news, they read, they understand what time it is. And I think that Mexico, El Salvador, Nicaragua, the surrounding countries that are allowing these people to come into our country should most certainly be punished. But what do you think? Do you think that we should send more military to the border to make sure they don't come in? Should there be any kind of weaponry used in the situation? I'm not really sure about gunplay, but most certainly some tear gas. I don't care. Man, woman, child. At the end of the day, you know what you're doing. You know what the whole point of this is. You're trying to come as a big group, thousands of people to overwhelm the system. It's already being overwhelmed right now at the border. You got churches filling up. You got ICE detention centers filling up. They know that there's only so much we can handle at the border. That's why they're coming in one big pile. What should be the penalty for countries that are allowing this to happen? Because like I said, Honduras, this is a country that's very far away, very far south. You have to come through other South American countries to get to the U.S., Mexico being the biggest and most certainly the longest. You have to go all the way up the country of Mexico to come to the U.S., whether it's Texas, Mexico, Arizona, California, or wherever they decide to go. So, what should be the penalty for these countries that are allowing this to happen? What should we do? Do you think the wall will help? Whatever your comments are, please let me know in the comments below.